Hello, everybody. Welcome to whenever we talk to our partner John, it always begins with "Hello, everybody" or "Hello" from Seinfeld.
Hello.
Anyway, so that's that. And today we're going to be talking about. Did I even say Story Studio Podcast? Welcome to the Story Studio Podcast. We're going to be talking about.
It's a podcast.
It is a podcast. I miss that original art. I think we should go back to it for worst show ever.
Yes.
We're going to talk about just cases where there's. Can you have multiple main characters, or who is the main character of certain movies? It's not always straightforward. On the last episode, we talked about The Matrix, and it's pretty easy that, and actually I would tweak this because Dave was a kind of like, well, how would you debate why there aren't?
Well, I heard that there was a debate about it, and I was like, did anybody take the other side? I can't imagine that.
And I think that what we want to talk about more is, say, protagonists, like who has an arc, are there multiple arcs going on, that sort of thing. But before we delve into that, I want to do something cools, but because Dave had a cliffhanger from last week. But before we do that, and this is actually kind of a weird mindfucky future thing, is because I wanted to tell you guys about the new book that's out, but it's not actually out. So for you live viewers, this book isn't actually out. I don't know where the link goes, but by the time it's on the feed, it will be out. And that's A Tale of Two Authors. We have a link in the note about that. Do you want to just briefly describe what that is, Sean? I actually don't know a ton of detail about it.
Yeah, I actually really enjoyed writing this. So it started out as a very simple idea that, of course, I couldn't stick to. So those of you who know Andre Chaperone, who is
what kind of name is that? A name? Sorry, Andre, that's a callback.
Andre is he's really great, and he's one of our very favorite marketers. Just super ethical, story-based marketing, and.
Super nice guy too.
Just
very
really great guy. Yeah. And he has this really wonderful post that he wrote. I think it's like 10 years old now. And it's called Frank and Matt. And it basically contrasts two different marketers, one who's like a real opportunist and always like, looking for water in the desert, and another guy who just sits down and digs a well instead. And so I thought that'd be an interesting thing to explore, because for authors, opportunity cost is not really something that we pay a lot of attention to. Now, for us internally, right now, it's something we pay huge attention to. But for the first many years, it was like, wee! And we just did whatever kind of seemed the most fun. For me and Johnny, that meant writing whatever we wanted, from Unicorn Western to Hop into the Beam to, adult video, like all in the same year, which is crazy. And for the company at large, it meant jumping into education and software and doing all this other stuff. Where if we had just actually, Johnny, we don't talk about this in the book, but can you imagine if, now I don't think this world exists, because I think a lot of our superpowers that we have right now have come from our wayward direction in the last several years. But can you imagine if 6-7 years ago, we just said, you know what, let's just write. Let's do nothing but write books and release them.
Let's do that. Let's do that.
Right. So this is what that book is about. It's the two paths. There's one.
So there's the right path, and then there's what we did.
Right. Except they're
right path.
Neither one are right or wrong. Both paths, have some things they could do better. Now there's a Pete. And for those of you who think this is funny, his name is Pete because for the first many years that we had write, publish, repeat, we said it very fast, especially me. So it sounded like the book was called Write, Publish, Repeat. So our main character is named Pete, and then the other character is Alexa. And Alexa just does a little better job, I guess, in weighing what things are going to cost her. And so,
do you ever say anything like, Alexa, turn on all the lights in the house?
Never. But I do think that
now, Alexa, turn off all the lights.
I did have
our viewers saying this right now.
Yeah, send my nudes.
So anyway, it's our first parable. It's the first parable I ever wrote. But I didn't really know how to get this information across without it being really dry and boring.
Yeah, how are you feeling about parables? Everybody loves parables.
Yeah, so when we were brainstorming this book, Neve let me know that she hates parables. But the reason she hates parables is because they're usually not done by
They're so
storytellers.
formulaic. There's always some wizened old
Yeah.
cliche character who shows up at exactly the right time. I just happen to be in the neighborhood. I'm a little offensive.
Yeah,
I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to hear.
yeah, we don't have that issue in this. It is a parable written by a storyteller, a professional storyteller. So it does pull that off. But I do think I think you guys will like it. It's different than the other nonfiction that we put out so far, but I think it's a special title.
Well, so I want to move on to something cool, but let me just ask you really quick. If it's a tale of two authors and neither one is really right, is there a lesson? Like, what's the lesson? What are you getting out of this book?
Oh yeah, for sure. There's a lesson. I would say, and I do wrap it up at the end. It's not all narrative. At the end, I'm like, okay, well, here's how you would apply it to you as an author. And the point is that I think we all exist on a spectrum. I don't think Pete is right. I don't think Alexa is right. I think that they're both right. I think Alexa could have afforded to take a few more chances. Pete could have taken way less. But the point is, when I started out, I would say I was probably 80 to 90% Pete and 10 to 20 Alexa. And now it's completely the opposite. I'm probably 80 to 90% Alexa, and I just got a little bit of Pete left in me. And that's a good thing. But it also depends on who you are, who you're collaborating with. I think that the point is to recognize yourself in both stories and then just be more aware.
So if you guys are interested in that, it is at sterlingandstone.net/2authors, and two is spelled out, TWO, sterlingandstone.net/2authors. All right, so Dave, relieve the anticipation on your something cool. Let's hear it.
So Netflix released El Camino, which is a Breaking Bad movie that follows the ending of Breaking Bad. I'm not going to spoil Breaking Bad or El Camino.
How hyped were you for this before it came out?
Oh, very hyped.
Well, I guess if you watched it at 12:01, it kind of answers the question.
But I will say this: lower your expectations. You'll enjoy it more.
Okay,
it's wonderful, but lower your expectations.
I don't have huge expectations. I think that
I have great expectations.
I think it's amazing that they were able to film it in secret and that it was all done. And I think that he's a subtle storyteller, and so I just what I expect is not some big revelatory explosive piece of work. What I expect is a character.
Well, there is an explosion. It's a movie, so there has to be an explosion.
No. I mean a character study.
I know.
That's all I want.
I will say that there's no real surprise. Whatever you thought happened, pretty much happened.
Okay.
In
I don't need to be surprised. I need to be.
Well, see, I think a lot of people are hoping, and I'm not gonna say what, but I think a lot of people are hoping for there's not that moment.
Actually alive or something.
I'm not gonna say.
That's stupid because that would just undermine.
It undermines it. I hate that.
Yeah.
That's why I hate Dr. Sleep after The Shining, because it just undermined everything that happened at the end of my favorite book.
It pretty much just tells what happened to Jesse after the end of Breaking Bad. There are some cool cameos in it, I will say that much. But it's a smaller movie. It's really like really good episodes.
2 hours?
It's 2 hours, a little over 2 hours, I think, or just under. It's like really two good, really episodes, and there is a very cool, there's a very cool scene. It's got two things that Vince Gilligan does really well.
Close-ups or weird ass angle.
A weird angle. There is a scene, an overhead shot, where Jesse is like tearing his house apart. It's not spoiling anything. And the overhead shot is fucking awesome because you're like, you just really appreciate it. And then there's a scene later where there's a very good sort of a build up to something that happens, and it's really fucking awesome. So there's a good payoff, but it's a slow simmer sort of smaller story. So if you go in expecting that, it's perfect. If you wanted I don't know, some big twist or anything, you're not going to get that.
Yeah, I don't need a big twist. That sounds perfect for me, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, really, I just want to see him take care of the characters that we've seen, right?
Yes.
And Jesse, like, I always wanted to know what happened to Jesse. I think that I'm done with Walter. Like, I know his story, and I don't need any more from Saul because that's a whole separate thing. But all I would want from this, I don't
Wait,
need
you
an
don't
amazing
need more from Saul?
No. I mean, I know that that's being handled.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Okay.
right? I don't need a movie about Saul. But this feels like closure. Like, you know, Saul got his extra story and Walter's done. But Jesse really was the heart and soul of Breaking Bad.
I was hoping they'd find a way to make Mike alive. I will spoil that. He's not alive. I was, because, you know, technically he could have still been alive. I was hoping for that. I fucking love that character.
Yeah, I'm sorry, dude.
I was thinking of some, but we've done them all. So I'm gonna do two, but I'm gonna do really quickly because we've already talked about them before, but just sort of to reinforce, or we haven't heard them in a while, and I think they're cool. The first is actually really recent. So Sean mentioned the corrections, and I started reading it, and I really love it. So I just gotta say,
yeah. Yes.
now, I mean, it's a little slower because I'm juggling it with I'm reading something internally as well, and I'm not terribly far into it, but I'm like, I don't know, 20%, and I don't know. Every once in a while, I really like that indulgent literary style where you can go off in some weird long sentence, parenthetical, whatever.
Yeah.
The section.
Are you listening to it or are you reading it?
No, I'm reading it. And I'm enjoying reading it. But just things like, I mean, for anybody who's worried about spoilers for the corrections or whatever, I don't think this is really a spoiler. But it's a scene where he's walking around with the like salmon in his pants and stuff.
I told Cindy all about that scene after I read it.
Yeah, that's a really good scene, a really good character moment. So I do really enjoy that. And then the second thing, again, which we've also covered on this show before, but I finally started reading, in this case I am listening to Quiet, the audiobook.
Oh, yeah, Susan
And
King.
I hadn't read it before, and it's interesting because I think that as I get a little older, I'm realizing that I have a lot more introvert tendencies than I think I do.
Yeah.
Because I'm able to turn it on. And if you guys have seen, you know, like Summit Johnny, like I can really genuinely, it's not anything that's disingenuous, walk around and just be very extroverted and interested in everything that's going on. But day to day, like I kind of am a loner. I'm honestly a lot like Dave in I just kind of, you know, I do kind of do my own thing. I have my own introvert tendencies. I like quiet. At the end of these podcasts, for some reason, the end of Friday, I am gassed.
Johnny's like very specific about the time for that reason. He's like, yeah, I'm done. like I'm done when it's done.
Yeah, I need to if I put something after the podcast on the schedule, it needs to be like I could talk to John after the podcast or something. Like I could do a meeting that wasn't very high octane, but like writing or something only if I really, really have to. So anyway, that was interesting just to give me some more insight into myself, but it's a little less practical than I had hoped. There's a lot more like studies about, it's almost like she's kind of an introvert apologist. And I mean, I already I'm cool with that. I don't think introverts are bad and need to be
introverts aren't lazy assholes.
Right. I wish she had done a little bit more of and maybe this is coming. I have like an hour left of how to deal strategies and stuff. It's called Quiet. I forget. Susan Cain, I think, is the author.
Yeah.
And it's just called Quiet. Like it's like the power of introverts in a noisy world or something. And it's interesting. So
yeah, I might be on the extreme spectrum in that after I speak to anybody for even 5 minutes, I have to go shower and cry for about an hour in a fetal position.
Well, I used to fight that, and I'm just kind of bulldoze my way through it. But I'm increasingly realizing no, I really do need that downtime. And I know that when we did something for the summit, I think it was this year, where we had 3 things right in a row. And then Sean had an extra thing. We weren't putting it on, but we had
one more thing.
Yeah, we had 2 days of summit, 1 day of workshop, 2 days of stone table, and they were back to back to back. And then Sean had something else. It was like a full week.
Funnel.
Oh my God, I came home and they were end to end. We would start, I would go even earlier because I go to the gym first, but we'd start early and then we'd have dinners and stuff and go late and then get up early and do it again. And by the end, I was physically ill. It was just a whole thing. So anyway, I thought that was interesting and I would recommend it. Quiet by Susan Cain. You have one, Sean?
Yeah, mine's a book also. It's I just started it. I'm only maybe a third of the way through, but I can already tell I really love it. It's Ryan Holiday's latest book, um, called "Stillness is the Key," and it's
It dovetails very well with what I was just talking about.
it really does. They're very complementing books, and it's his usual style that he's done for the last few books, where he's taking ideas from the Stoics and Greek philosophers, and
Yeah, he likes that blank is the blank sort of construction too.
right. So like obstacle is the way,
Ego is the enemy.
ego is the enemy. Yeah, and his stuff's just good. I think perennial, what is it? Perennial seller. Perennial seller should be required reading for every indie author.
Yeah, I enjoyed Perennial Seller. It was a little like, I found it to be a little bit like The One Thing in that I got it pretty quick and I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't think there was a ton of extra detail that was necessary, but I did enjoy it.
Yeah, you'll like Stillness is the Key, I think, because there's a lot of stories, just anecdotal. Oh, and by the way, I did, because you were saying that thing yesterday about slowing it down, so I did that today, and it was hilarious. Like, I was laughing.
Yeah, what he's talking about, and you guys won't care about this, but just so that's not dangling out there, is I listen to Ryan Holiday. I listen to most audiobooks on 2x, twice the speed, and including Ryan Holiday, who reads his own books, and his cadence at 2x is actually, he's a little fast but it's comfortable. Like, I don't mind.
It sounds like conversational. It sounds like
if he came up and talked to me, I would expect him to talk at that speed, and it wouldn't be that unusual. And so
is it like Sean at 1x?
Well, I actually made that reference on the meeting yesterday because Sean does talk, and I talk.
You're not
quickly,
the first one, dude.
right? Like, I talk quickly, and so when I know it's 2x intellectually, but I figure that's just how he sounds, and he has a good sound to him. And don't tell Ryan I said this. Sorry, Ryan. But when I slowed him down, I was like, oh, this voice isn't nearly as interesting. It sounded very slow, but it was funny, and that's how he talks. And I just got used to the fast version.
Yeah. All right. Well, since you already actually blew the whole punchline, I'll go ahead and fill it in. So yesterday, Johnny said he sounds like he's totally drunk.
Yes.
and so I was laughing out loud because after you're listening to Ryan Holiday on 2x and then you slow it down to 1x, he does sound very drunk. So that's fine.
And I don't think it's just because I'm used to it. Like, I think that 2x speed legit sounds like a good pace to me.
Do you like fiction at 2x?
Depends on the book.
Okay. I can't listen to anything 2x. I like the thoughtful pauses. I like all of that. I like, even when I'm listening to podcasts, where I used to have it where it would, delete the pauses between things. I didn't like it. I like
that would drive me nuts.
Conversation.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, I actually, this is a little masturbatory, but I used to listen to our podcast a lot, just because I should again, because I do enjoy, like, these are fun. There was a while where they weren't as much fun to me, but they're fun again. And yeah, I didn't ever listen to them accelerated pace because I enjoyed the banter. So, okay. So moving into the topic, I guess. So what's the best way to frame this? So the question, because I stumbled over it a little bit, but the idea is, who is the main, actually, okay, so it stemmed from a company Slack debate. Basically, can you have more than one main character? And again, when we say main character, so like in The Matrix.
Is it like who the average audience member is going to care about the most?
Well, I think that's part of what we're here to dissect. But I'm actually going to pull back a little bit from the term main character, even though I understand what it means and it's going to feel roughly equivalent probably to most people. But a main character is almost like there's a character, is he or she main or not? Primary. So like in The Matrix, you could say, oh, well, the main characters are Morpheus, Trinity, and Neo. Why would Morpheus or Trinity not be the main character? Because they're main characters. But if we're talking about like protagonists, who actually, I'm realizing in the notes here, is a main character different from protagonist. And I guess I'm arguing that it is. But I think that we're looking at, can there be multiple main characters, or is there ambiguity of a main character in certain popular fiction as to, who we're really following and who we care how they develop and they have their crisis moments and they need to change internally and that sort of thing. I mean, that's the way I'm interpreting this. Yes, no?
Yeah, that sounds right to me.
So what does make somebody a main character or a protagonist, or do we even want to use those interchangeably?
I think that it's about like how much you care. I think if you don't care about a character, it doesn't matter.
So like every character in the Da Vinci Code, there's no main character.
Okay, so
The code itself.
so like
Da Vinci is the main character.
Okay, so Stand By Me,
Yes.
right? Now, Stand By Me is just kind of an awesome movie for, like, it's got great 4 characters. Now, I think most people, if you saw that movie and they would just ask you, who's the main character, it'd probably be Will Wheaton, right? Because he's narrating it as the grown-up is Richard Dreyfuss in the future. But to me, when I saw that movie, there was no doubt about it.
River Phoenix?
Yeah, absolutely. He's the character I cared about the most. I wanted to know what happened to Chris Chambers. I was very, very much invested in that. So I don't know that he's the main character, but he is the character I cared about the most.
See, I think I would tend to define it in terms of arc, and it'll be interesting to see if we believe that there can. I think that ensemble movies. So I think that there definitely can. I think that ensemble movies, that's very much the case because
The Walking Dead is TV show, but
well, I think a lot of long-running TV. I mean, we're watching Shameless right now, and I don't know why I never really noticed this before because it's not like it's unique to Shameless. But at the beginning of Shameless, if you haven't seen it, you're watching that family. You're watching the Gallaghers. But by season 9 or whatever it's in, there's a Frank story, there's a Liam story, there's a Fiona story, and they don't really intersect very much. They're just kind of like you just see scenes from each one. And I think that, so like Magnolia is, I mean, they all do come together in the end, but that's one where the characters feel very different for at least most of the movie. Like by different, I mean separated.
Yeah, that's who was the main character for Magnolia?
That's a good question. Maybe
yeah. It depends who you identify with, I guess. I think that if you look at like the cop,
I would have said John C. Reilly if I had to.
Yeah,
he was the heart of it, but Tom Cruise's character was very integral to it, and I don't know.
Or Philip Seymour Hoffman's character. I mean, he's minor, but he's also touching everybody.
I forget the daughter's name. She was also like, that would be a tough movie to dissect. We should have done that. Who is the main character of a movie that like I think we're the only ones that like?
Well, I think also if you're looking at what's the takeaway for anybody listening to this now? It's how do you treat all of your characters like a main character in that you have to care about them, a lot so that shows up on the page?
Or are they? Sorry, Dave. Go ahead.
No, you go.
Well, I was going to say, or are they a bunch of characters, many of which are a foil against which the protagonist is measured?
I think with in our own case study, I was thinking, like when I first saw the show notes, I was thinking about Yesterday's Gone. The main character isn't who it was supposed to be. It became the bad guy.
Yeah.
But is he the main character, or is he just the most popular character?
No, he's the main character.
No, he becomes the main character. Yeah.
Of the series, but you wouldn't know that early in.
And it was by design. It was by design
after season 1, though, right?
Middle of season 1. Like I was thinking, like, because I really liked his background in the fact we're talking about Mauricio. And the fact that he was so damaged, and like, could we make somebody so reprehensible into the hero of the story? And it was like, let's see how we could do that.
It was kind of awesome that we.
I remember where I was when Sean spoiled a Mauricio twist that involved an eye patch.
Wait, what?
I don't want to say it in case somebody hasn't read Yesterday's Gone. But I can see that being, because I mean, if anything is going to be a multiple main character situation, I would think that that's it, because you guys, the way you wrote that, I happen to know, was truly isolated. Like you didn't have a
there really was no main character. I wrote it as no main character in mine, but if I was going to have a main character, it wouldn't have been Mauricio. It would have been, my first choice probably would have been Mary. because there's a group there, and she's a mother and a daughter. She automatically has someone to protect. There's like a built-in arc there. Mauricio was a wild card. My second choice would have been Luca, who's an 8-year-old boy missing his family. Like, there's an arc there too. The serial killer, there's no arc. He was there for chaos. Like, I just wanted to have fun. That's why he existed, but he did become the heart of the story. And so there's a question there too. How much do you as the author decide that, and how much do you listen to it as the story unfolds? And because I think Dave and I were both listening, we were taking the pulse of the story, but we were also paying attention to how...
I've never had one that was a surprise. That hasn't happened to me. I mean, I've had ones where a character stands out and becomes a favorite, but that's different from being a protagonist.
Yeah, I guess so. Because, like, I know, like, you love Caspian.
I love Caspian one.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's not...
He's
really...
not a main... Well, he was a main character one book that's not even in our thing. But he's... even then, I would argue he wasn't. But he's just a fun character, and I could see him having a real prominence in the 4th season of The Beam.
What about Sam Dial in The Beam? So there's a character who, I'm not saying he became a main character at all, but he was basically like written as kind of a joke.
Yeah.
Right. But then as we wrote him, he became more important. He became more important to the story. He got lines. He got like...
Well, important is different from main. I tend to think in terms of arc. So some of the examples that we have here, so like Lethal Weapon is a buddy movie. Riggs and Murtaugh, you could argue, okay, it's both of them. And it is, but it's Riggs. Like, because he's the one with all the damage. Like, you start out just seeing how bad off he is.
It's hard to argue with that.
Right. And, similarly, like Titanic. So Titanic is, is it Jack or is it Rose? I think it's clearly Rose. I don't think it's Jack. I think that Jack was kind of always who he was. He found love or whatever, but he was who he was, and it's Rose who had to change. I think that that's the filter through which I would see these things.
I would agree with that.
Go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to ask Dave, because something that's happened with a lot of our stories is we have the antagonist gets its own POV, right? And Dave usually picks some, pretty unsavory antagonists, but we do a really good job of getting in their heads and making them an actual character. So is there any, like, probably the most heinous example of this that we have is a character named Paul Dodd. And he's a monster.
I read that, dude.
Yeah.
It was so uncomfortable.
But he's not a monster in the same way that Mauricio is, where Mauricio, there is a heart.
He's worse.
He has damage. Yes, but Mauricio does things specifically to connect with the reader. So it's like, hey, I really want you to be in on this with me. We don't do that with Paul. We can't do that with Paul.
No.
Like, he is an unredeemable monster. And yet, it's our job.
You're right. A dude who has sex with dead bodies and murders people, that dude can be turned around.
Yeah.
Well, the dead bodies aren't hurting anyone. Children is like you're ruining their lives.
What if they were dead children?
God, can we not?
Just trying to fill Dave's void. So
the big void.
The big void.
So what's your question, Sean?
Well, anyway, the point is that with a character like that, we're not trying to bring the reader in, but we're still trying to develop enough empathy so that the character feels like a real person and the reader is in the story. So do you ever treat that? I'm just asking out of actual curiosity because I only get the drafts when they're back. I know you get in these characters' heads, but do you ever think of them like seriously treating a guy like Paul Dodd as the protagonist when you're telling his side of the story?
Only from his point of view, in that I don't think anybody is like the villain of their own story. They have, whatever conditions made them into the monster that they are. You try to explain that in a way that you're not defending them, but you're letting the reader know how this person can truly exist. Because I think it's important for a good story, for me anyway, that it's got to be believable. You got to see, well, how can this sequence of events lead to this happening? Like, because even consider, like, okay, say you got somebody that's I don't know, they got a meth house across the street from you.
Okay, I've been there.
Okay, yeah, it's same here. Several years ago. So you think of that person and you're like, oh, fucking asshole. Like, you're just thinking like all these negative things. But if you rewind their life at all, you could see the steps that where it went wrong. Usually, anyway, you could see they weren't this person at the beginning. How did they end up this way? And I like examining that in characters, and I think it does make it a little better. You want to be careful that the audience isn't asked to sympathize with an unforgivable thing, but at the same time, you want them to
understand them.
Yeah, and I think it makes a person scarier because you can see how that person can exist, and it just makes it all the more real to me. And being real makes it way scarier than just some unbelievable thing. Like, that's why monster movies never really frighten me, because I know that's not going to happen. But
yeah,
you take, some serial killer that becomes obsessed or whatever, and you just see how that happens. Yeah, that's pretty fucking frightening. For me, anyway. I don't know. Some people are scared by...
No, I'm with you. The more real something is, I think, by far, the more upsetting it is.
Yeah, that's why zombie shows the zombies never really frighten me as much as the people, because the zombies are...
Well, people are always
impossible.
going to frighten you more.
Oh, yeah.
What about movies or books with multiple character arcs? So, like, I have an opinion on this, but like Pulp Fiction.
You mean like who's the main character?
Who's the main character, or are there multiples?
I think that I don't know that you can say there are multiple main characters, but no, let me say that better.
Or protagonists.
I think Tarantino could say there are multiple main characters, but I think that if you, like, once you are consuming, you have to decide who the main character is. So,
I would agree with that. I think you need a North Star under which to align everything. Otherwise, it just is a bunch of stuff that happens.
Agreed. So, for me, I'm most interested in Sam Jackson, right? Like,
see, I would have picked Vincent Vega.
Right, and most people would, actually, I think, but not for me. I like the other way.
Interesting.
So snakes on a motherfucking plane.
Yeah, Dave, who would you pick as the head for, or the protagonist for Pulp Fiction?
I barely remember Pulp Fiction, but Sam Jackson, simply because I never really cared for John Travolta.
Or, I mean, Bruce Willis. Bruce Willis has a very definite arc. Actually, Bruce Willis probably has the most complete arc.
Yeah, he wasn't the main for me.
Yeah, ensembles are harder because the characters don't... When I say ensembles, I mean where they're kept separate, where the storylines are kept separate for a long period of time. Because without the characters interacting, you don't get that whole, like, seeing each other through the other character's eyes. Like, usually a secondary character or a second main character or whatever is a foil through which you see so, like, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which I won't spoil, but it's amazing. So you could say, well, like, Brad Pitt's character is really big. Well, no, Leonardo DiCaprio's character is there, and Brad Pitt's character is a contrast. He's another element, through which we see Leonardo DiCaprio's character. He's what Leonardo DiCaprio's character could have been, under certain circumstances, that sort of thing.
I think the best, to bring Vince Gilligan up yet again, Breaking Bad, Walter White is the main character. Jesse Pinkman becomes the heart of the story, the secondary main character. Then in Better Call Saul, you take this comedy relief from Breaking Bad. He is a main character. And then Mike is a main character. And Saul's brother is a main character. You have any one of those.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
any one of those people, you want to know their fucking story. And like they have especially in Better Call Saul, it breaks from format more than Breaking Bad, where like one character will have like a complete arc in the story, and it breaks away from the main story. Like 70-80% of the show is about like Mike or something, or Saul's brother, Jimmy. No, Jimmy's Saul. I don't remember his brother's name. Anyway, it takes away, but I never mind the diversion because I like that character. I want to know where that goes. He can make a show about every one of these fucking characters as the star of that show, and I would watch it.
You know, I'd watch a show about Skinny Pete. Like, no doubt about it.
Well, you know, after El Camino, I would too. He has a good moment in that, and I loved it.
Yeah, my favorite Skinny Pete moment, and I like that you brought.
I don't
this
even
up,
remember
Dave.
who Skinny Pete is.
He's
skinny.
Is he in Better Call Saul or is he in Breaking Bad?
He's in Breaking Bad. He's got fucked up skin.
I don't remember him.
He always wears like that hat.
Yeah, he's older than he hangs out with Gopher. Like, what's his name? Not Gopher.
I don't remember Gopher either.
Badger.
I don't rember Badger either.
Yeah,
I need to
exactly.
watch it again. I think Austin will watch it with me.
He hangs out with Badger, but he's older. Anyway, there's this, and Vince Gilligan is so good at this kind of thing. And again, Dave, thanks for bringing this up because it does bring it home that I think Vince Gilligan treats all his characters like they are the protagonist. And that is why that they are just so rich. There's this wonderful moment, maybe season 3 or something, where Jesse's hanging out with Badger and Skinny Pete, and they're at like some music store. And I think Jesse's buying big giant speakers because he's just being destructive and wants to be loud, throwing big parties at his house. And Skinny Pete is over and he just starts playing the piano. And do you remember this, Dave?
Vaguely.
And it's just like he plays the piano beautifully. And you would never, ever expect this guy to play the piano, let alone play the piano so beautifully. And they don't talk about it. Like there's
right.
Like, and that's what makes Vince Gilligan great, because in another show that becomes a plot point. Or
yeah, I have a real pet peeve about a version of that, and I can't think of any examples at all. But they'll show you a scene. It's usually visual. It is visual. They'll show you a scene, and there's something in it. It's either a joke or it's something you're supposed to notice, and then it's like, oh, and then they zoom in on it. And you're like, motherfucker, I saw it. Why are you being an asshole?
Yes. And so, you know, Vince Gilligan doesn't do that. I mean, he does draw our eye to very specific things, but he lets the show breathe. And he does treat all his protagonists or all his characters like they're just worthy of being a protagonist. The guy, Salamanca, right? Like,
yeah,
that guy, or Gus Fring.
I was going to say Gus. I think
Gus is pretty great.
I would like to see a Gus story.
Right. Gus could totally be the protagonist of Breaking Bad, just from a different angle, right? He's not any less sympathetic. I mean, he's a murderer, but so is Walter.
That's why he's so interesting.
I think he's more sympathetic than Walter.
I agree.
Especially like that whole scene by the pool.
Oh, yeah. That was
boyfriend.
Amazing. Yeah.
I was just, when I saw that, I was like, oh man, I fucking love this character. And
yeah, agreed. Yeah, totally.
All right. So let us know what you guys think. When, I don't know, email us and stuff. I guess I'm tired. So just to remind you guys that A Tale of Two Authors is out for those of you who aren't listening live. sterlingandstone.net/two authors with two spelled out, TWO. And also just for you live viewers, we aren't going to have a live show next week because Sean is, and this is going to sound like a punchline. It's not. He's in Mexico. So even though he's not Mexican anymore, he's going to Mexico. And so we're not having a live show next week. That's why we did 2 today for you live viewers. For you,
why would anybody go to
care.
Mexico? You're going to get kidnapped. What the hell?
I don't think, given their accommodations, they're going to get kidnapped. Okay. I just don't get that feeling.
It's possible.
Never leave your house.
Just in life.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening to Story Studio Podcast. We will see y'all next time. Bye-bye.
Adios.